Today, we're diving deeper into popping our grades. We got off to a great start on this subject in part 1, where we looked at really what it means to pop our grades. Just to recap, that definition for me means that we are trying to max out the eye-catchingness of our images without letting anything start to look weird, or certainly to get any kind of artifacting or breaking. And we're going to build on that foundation that we started with in part 1 and take a look at a really common example and sometimes a really challenging example of a situation where we might need to pop our grades. And that's one where the incoming image actually already has a lot of color and or contrast built into it. And either we've decided or the client has asked for us to go even further with that. And that can actually be really tricky to do in a way that leads to a better result than what you started with, instead of simply a weirder result than what you started with. So that's what we're going to focus on today, is how we can take an incoming image that's already pretty well popped and pop it out further, take it to that next level, make it look great. Before we dive into Resolve, if you haven't had a chance to subscribe to this channel yet, make sure that you do. I put out 2 new videos every single week on color grading inside of DaVinci Resolve. And I also do a live session on Friday mornings, grade school, where we can all get together in a live AMA format. And you can ask me any question you want to about the subjects we've been exploring that week here on the channel. So make sure you subscribe and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you don't miss any of the cool stuff that we are doing here on the channel with color grading inside of DaVinci Resolve. Let's dive into DaVinci Resolve and talk about how we can pop the grade of an image that is already kind of popped. So let's take a look at this image that I've got here. What am I looking at so far? Well, thus far, I've already gone ahead and set up my color management. If you're not familiar with color management, lots of great content here on the channel that will help you get familiar with that concept. And in particular, my DaVinci Wide Gamut Workflow series will show you the exact settings that I'm using here today. And I've also gone ahead and done my base or my primaries grading here, like so, just to kind of get that popping going, even with what I choose to do in my exposure, my contrast ratio, and my balance nodes. But to be honest, I haven't gone super far with those things, and I'm probably not going to be able to go super far with those things because I've already got a decent amount of contrast and color in this image. So if I want to pop my grades, I'm going to have to use some specific techniques, some specific strategies that I'm going to share with you now. Here's the first one that I want us to look at, and this really touches on the overall theme that I want to emphasize today when we talk about popping our grades. Popping your grade is not a knob, it's not a lever, it's not a button that you press. Popping your grade is about looking at all the individual pieces of your image and looking for opportunities for where you can make the image feel better or pop more strongly. So a great example of that would be that when I look at this image here and when I play through it, what I notice when I really start to pay attention is I don't actually love the color of my hero's wardrobe here. I feel like the yellow is skewing kind of a little bit greenish yellow, and I would like to change that color around in a nice, clean way, and in doing so, make this a more captivating image and also make it a bit more of a legible image. Let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to go over to my custom curves, or excuse me, my hue versus hue curves, and I'm going to go and grab my eyedropper here, and I'm going to eyedropper over my subject. Sometimes if your eyedropper doesn't appear, you just need to tap over to another palette and then tap back and it'll reappear. So let's try that. And what I'm going to do here is try to wake up my eyedropper like so. And I'm just dragging all around her shirt. Let me reset that and try one more time. I'm trying to get just a nice clean 2 goalposts with a control point in the middle. There we go. So what I want to do now, because I would like to warm up this yellow, I'd like it to be a little bit less greenish yellow, more of kind of like a gold yellow. I'm going to take this middle control point and start to drag it upward. You don't need a ton here. If I look at my hue rotate field right here, which by the way, you can even drag if you're trying to get a little bit more fine control, I probably don't need to go much more than like a 12, a 13, a 14, that kind of thing. And if I go before and after on that, you can see that's just generally, at least to my eye, a more aesthetically pleasing color of yellow. And it's also doing something else significant. It's actually reducing the color separation in this image. We always talk about increasing color separation when we're color grading, right? But there are actually instances where we want to reduce that. We want to have fewer distinct colors in the image so that the image is more legible. And because it's more legible or readable, it's more pleasing. So that's really what I feel I'm doing here is, first of all, just on a surface aesthetic level, making this color a little bit more appealing, but I'm also removing a distracting additional hue from this image. And in doing so, making it a little simpler of an image, a little bit easier of an image to read. An image that reads easier, reads faster, and an image that reads faster pops more. Okay, so that's a hue versus hue adjustment, and you can do that and look out for those opportunities throughout a color grade and say, what if this color was that color instead? Of course, you can go too far with it. I would never want to turn this yellow into like a cyan, but you can think about subtle rotations like that that really allow you to kind of like art direct the image or piggyback on the art direction that's already in place and really try to optimize the base color palette that you are looking at in the image. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is I want to look at yet another strategy that is going to allow me to kind of go with that idea of somewhat homogenizing or merging the colors in my image so that there's a little bit fewer distinct colors or saturations in this image so that it reads a little bit faster. Here's how we're going to do this. This is a cool trick that we've looked at variations of before, but never done exactly this way here on the channel. I've got a new serial node here, node number 4. I'm going to right click this, go to color space. Instead of HSV, which we've talked about in the past, I'm going to do HSL, okay? And now what I'm going to do is right click and turn channels 1 and 3 off. What does that mean? What am I doing? Well, I'm now in the HSL color model, so channel 2 is no longer G, like it would be in RGB. Channel 2 is what? S. S stands for saturation. So now whatever I do in this node, all I'm operating on is the S, or the saturation channel, in my HSL color model. And what that's going to allow me to do is the following. I'm going to take my gamma in my primaries. I'm going to start to move that up like so. So I'm getting saturation, but more in the middle and low saturations as opposed to the high saturations. And then I'm going to counter that by pulling my gain, which is where my high saturations live, a bit further down, like so. This is simply a way of pumping more color into the image without letting things clip out or get weird. And it's also a way of homogenizing my saturations. I'm literally compressing the total range of lowest saturation to highest saturation in this image by pulling this gain down and by bringing my gamma up. So this is yet another strategy for maxing out color where I have room to push it, and also sort of compressing my overall saturations into a more pleasing register. So this is a very different approach, very different result than I would get by simply grabbing a saturation knob and cranking it off to the right. So that's number 2, okay? And the last thing that I want to look at here, it's something that I'm noticing as I start to increase saturation and increase contrast and do the other things that I'm doing in this image. I'm going to do a new serial node again, and something that I'm noticing that I don't really like is the transition or the edge in between where this highlight or this practical source gets fully bloomed and is achromatic, and this edge where it's still got some warm color to it. So here's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to do another move with my curves. This time I want to go to my loom versus sat, which is going to be over here. All I'm going to do is grab my rightmost control point and start to drag that down. And you can see that as I do, that edge is being softened somewhat, right? This is more of a remedial thing. This is about removing a distraction or removing something that's less ideal than it is about introducing some exciting new flavor. But it's important here because this practical source has really gotten to where it's distracting to me. And what I want to do now is add another control point so that I'm not affecting any more of the image than I need to get the result that I'm after. So something like this, where I'm only affecting kind of this upper half of the image, or mostly affecting that upper half of the image, that's a nice tweak that is having a good impact up there and not letting me too much of a change in the rest of the image, which is my goal. So we've already come quite a ways here. If we go before and then after, we've really popped out this grade, and we've got some more eye-catching quality going on here, even though we already came in with lots of color, pretty strong contrast. We've got a strong source in the frame. We've got lots of art-directed elements, but we've really gone even further with that now. And the last thing that I want to do, kind of a finishing touch here, is I'm going to use an ingredient from my Voyager LUT Pack. I'm going to go over here into my LUTs, go to the Voyager Pro Pack, go to my modifiers here. Any of these modifiers would do a version of what I'm looking to do right now, which is to add some color harmony up and down the tone scale. So a little bit of cool color in the bottom, a little bit of warm color in the top. But I'm going to do this using my Vega modifier here, like so. And I'm just going to double click and add that on, like so. Now, if you don't have the Voyager Pro Pack, you could always go in and create your own split toning curve right inside of Resolve's custom curves. Check out my recent look development series if you want to get some shorthand or some tips on how to go about that. But for me, one of the big benefits of having a high quality LUT library that's set up to work for DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate like I'm working in today is exactly what I just did. I didn't have to go in and draw a curve. The curve's already drawn. I know it's high quality. I know I can trust it. I know what it's going to do, and I can instantaneously get that result. I could even be in the room with clients and not make them wait for me to draw a curve and finesse the position of my control points and make it look really nice. So I think that's a win there. So if we look at the addition of that ingredient, that's the final piece that to me really starts to bring everything together. And if we turn everything off and then on, we've really made this grade pop. We've really added a lot more visual interest to this image. We've made it a lot more eye-catching than it was before, even though it already came in with lots of strong color, a decent amount of strong contrast. We've been able to push it even further without things starting to look strange or get clipped out or look weird. So I hope you enjoyed this second installment in the Popping Your Grades series that we've been working on here. This is one of those phrases or ideas that gets thrown around so much in color grading, but until we have a specific definition of what it means to us and some of our key strategies for going about accomplishing it, it really doesn't mean much. And it's just a phrase that gets thrown around that doesn't mean the same thing to us as it means to our clients, and it can really be a barrier to getting the best results. So I hope over the course of this series that I've armed you with some really good information for how to meaningfully go about defining and executing popping your grades.